He quickly dismissed my suggestion and said the match would more likely to go to 30% state, 70% federal. If that happens, then and depending upon the amount of federal funds, if there's less federal funds, it's easier to match it, obviously. If the federal funds were to stay where they are and they went to a 70-30, we would be facing the possibility in this state that for the first time ever, we would have to return some of our allocated federal funds. So we wouldn't be able to match. One thing is clear, we're going to have to work smarter, work together, and figure out how to do more with less. As these funding scenarios become our funding reality, we'll have to prioritize and focus on the true needs here in Ohio. And we all know that there's a difference between wants and needs, but it can be very difficult to distinguish between the two. I have heard hundreds and hundreds of presentations from communities and individuals and local officials, members of the General Assembly, about various projects that are needed years ago in Licking County and in the last several years around the state of Ohio. Every project, 100% of the projects that you hear about are critical for economic development. Nobody comes to the table. I don't know if they think that's the key. That's how you get things done, but this is critical for economic development. Now, there's other things that go with the project. Little League team's going to do better. The cheerleaders are going to be prettier. A lot of things are going to happen, but the critical thing is economic development. We have to find some solutions to evaluating what it truly is economic development, what is really going to get us results. And we have to put first, I think, in my judgment, safety and congestion relief. So finding solutions to the impending crisis and realigning our priorities is not going to be an easy task. We're going to need to be together, innovative and creative. I believe there are some helpful options contained in both the ODOT budget and the Governor's General Fund budget. Ideas that hold great potential to change the face of transportation in Ohio, and we will be ready to act as soon as the budgets become law on July 1st. The most important items contained in both bills is the increased authority that allows us to enter into agreements with the private sector, and increased authority in the ODOT budget to allow us to use design-build processes for large, highly complex projects. And we've begun to think recently differently about design-build projects and how we can leverage them even farther with, and I was just talking to some folks out in the hallway about the idea of having a design-build project and say we define the parameters of the project. And we will tell the industry, the teams that want to propose on this is how much money we have to spend. This is a $175 million project. The price is already set. You tell us what you can do for that much money. We're going to do that, I believe, in Ohio, and I think when we do, we'll be the first in the country, and probably the rest of the country will follow us. There's great potential, I believe, in harnessing the ingenuity and the resources of the private sector and to leverage the assets that Ohio has. We need to move projects more quickly and more quickly than we can with our traditional methods. Ohio is the 30th state in the union to adopt public-private partnerships. These types of agreements have helped other states deliver projects faster, to do maintenance quicker, to save money, and to improve their transportation network. I think we'll get the same results in Ohio, but it's going to be a new way of doing business. And we're going to have a lot of communicating to do and a lot of explaining to do. I've already done a lot of explaining to the members of the General Assembly. And one of the things that they like to say, and I had some folks say to me, is, well, if you're going to involve the private sector, they're going to want to make money. Really? Wow, I hadn't thought of that. So we explain that these are not win-lose situations. It can be a win-win situation where we can benefit. In the coming months, we're conducting a statewide study to look at potential projects that will help us and or make sense for the private sector. And we hope to start the first of many of our public-private partnerships in early 2012. We don't want to leave anything on the table and consider all methods at our disposal on how we can deliver projects. Additionally, as a part of the Governor's General Revenue budget, we're exploring our options as it pertains to the Ohio Turnpike. You folks have probably never heard of the Ohio Turnpike, have you? I know there's a lot of concern and feelings of uncertainty for some people when it comes to the Turnpike, and that's reasonable and expected. I certainly understand it. So I'm going to take a few minutes and try to provide some clarity and better understanding of how we intend to proceed. First, if we determine the lease of the Turnpike is in the best interest of Ohio, it will be a lease, not a sale. Ohio will always maintain the underlying ownership and ultimate control of the facility. We will not accept, as the Indiana did, a one-time lump sum upfront payment. Whatever deal that we would enter into would involve some payment up front and a percentage of the tolls for the life of the lease, so that there's continuing revenue for the state of Ohio. There will be performance standards. We're going to tell them how high the grass has got to be, what the condition of the pavement has to be, how they have to take care of their bridges, what they have to do with snow and ice. We will have performance standards that will require them to maintain the road at least as good as it's always been, and perhaps better. We will not agree to a no-compete clause. Oh, Indiana did that, where you agree not to improve the parallel roads. We will absolutely not do that. We will reserve the right to maintain and improve our roads as we see fit. There will be limit on the on the allowable toll increases, limits on the per year and the maximum. And there'll be a different formula for passenger cars, local commutes versus trucks and over the road. We'll establish a reserve amount, and we'll keep that in confidence. And basically that'll be an amount that if we don't get at least this good a deal, then we're not making a deal. And that's another thing I've heard from a number of people who are, again, we're asking them to vote on this, and they have to go home and defend their vote. So they're very concerned about that. And a number of members of the General Assembly have said to me, well, we're afraid you'll make a bad deal. Well, I don't think Governor Kasich wants to make a bad deal for the state of Ohio. And if you've noticed, he's pretty aggressive in defending and going after folks in terms of the state of Ohio. I know I don't want to make a bad deal for the state of Ohio. It's going to be an open process. You're going to know what the deal is. If it's not a good deal, we're not going to make it. None of the money that would come from the lease of the Turnpike will be used to operate the government or fill a budget gap. Absolutely not. It'll be reserved for infrastructure. It'll help us fill the gap that we're looking at with our funding crisis. And the majority of it would go for infrastructure in northern Ohio. Now, one of the things that I hear, and this is an emotional attachment I know that some of you have, and I've been to Northwest Ohio, and we're going farther east here later next week, I think, is, well, we've paid for it through the years. And I know you have made a lot of trips on the Turnpike, and you feel like you use it, and you probably pay those tolls a lot, and I respect that. The fact is, and some of you may be surprised, that local commutes pay about 10% of the cost of the Turnpike. 90% of the Turnpike is paid for by over-the-road long-haul truckers. How many mayors do we have here? Have some mayors? 1, 2. I saw you the other day. You've heard this before. 3. We got 3. Well, we got some mayors. We have some county commissioners. How many county engineers? Quite a few county engineers. The Turnpike's been there for 50 years. How much of the toll revenue has come to your local governments to help you with infrastructure problems over these 50 years? How much have you received? None to your knowledge. The bottom line is the Ohio Turnpike is a very valuable state asset that is underutilized and under-leveraged. Let me mention something to you, and those of you who are county engineers in particular, and maybe some of the county commissioners might realize this. There's a lot of problems that we have. One of the things that I wanted to do, I should say, is when I started in this job, is I wanted to set aside a program, what I called a local state aid program, where we would provide money. The state sets aside, ODOT sets aside a certain amount of our federal money for a local bridge program. That money doesn't get used very aggressively, and the reason it doesn't is because of the red tape and the NEPA process and the design standards that go with it. My goal was to set aside an equal amount of state money and let ODOT take all the federal money, set our own set of standards, and make that money a lot easier to use. Two reasons we haven't done that. One is we don't have any money. The other is that legally we can't spend state tax dollar or state gas tax dollars that come to ODOT off the state system. What if we had the revenue from the turnpike? It would not be state gas tax dollars. It would not be federal money. It would be extremely easy and flexible to use. We could use it with local governments. We could use it with public transit. And we could find a way to help people when they're with their infrastructure problems. Whatever we do, the way the process is right now is, assuming we get the legislation in the budget, we will go through a development of an RFP, a request for proposal. That request for proposal will outline our intentions with the turnpike. The Ohio General Assembly will get a chance to review that and have a chance to vote it up or down. If they don't like it, if you go see your senator, your state rep, and said, I can't live with this, they can vote it down. I think when you see the terms and conditions that we're going to put on it, you're going to say, this is a good idea. Once they vote it up and down, then we're free to go and negotiate. There'll be the Director of Department of Transportation and Director of OBM to negotiate a lease of the turnpike. Then that agreement would be subject to approval by the controlling board. So the General Assembly would be involved. It would be an open process. You would know what we're going to do. What I believe is that 2 or 3 years from now, if we do this, the road will still be there. It won't be in Germany or Wyoming. It'll still be in Ohio. It'll be in good condition. I believe your local commute tolls will be the same as they are now, or perhaps less. And you will have some infrastructure revenue that you can work with in your communities to get some things done. Now, the private sector isn't the only answer. We have to remain diligent and selective in the way we choose projects in order to ensure we're getting the best return on investment, selecting projects that will help get Ohio's economy back on track. This project selection process is quite a complex and difficult thing. Around the state, what you perceive as your pressing needs, someone in another area of the state sees as not so important because they have something in their area. I'll tell you a little story. When I became director the first time, after the first cabinet meeting, I was leaving the cabinet meeting and walking through the State House, and I heard somebody saying, "Director, director." And I thought, who is that guy talking to? Do any of you know Tim Cosgrove? You remember Tim Cosgrove used to work for the governor's office? Yeah. Well, it was Tim Cosgrove. And finally, I turned around and I said, "What? Are you talking to me?" "Yes." He says, "I have your promises list, and I need to give it to you before you get away." And I said, what is a promises list? He said, "Well, during the campaign, Governor Voinovich went around the state and he made promises to people. And during the course of that, he had us, and George Voinovich is one of the most honest and dedicated people that you'll ever know, and he said to this folks, keep a list of the promises that I make. If I tell somebody I'm going to do something." So we broke it all up into the various cabinet agencies. This is your list, and congratulations, you have the largest list by far. So I went back to my office, sat and looked at this, and there was on there the Chesapeake bypass, the Nelsonville bypass, the Maumee River crossing, things I had never heard of. The Troutwood connector in Dayton, 7-Eleven in Youngstown. What am I going to do with this? So there was somebody down in the planning section that I knew, and I said, "Would you have Ted come up here?" And I said, "Look, I've got this list. I don't even know what this stuff is. So would you tell me a little 2 or 3 sentences of what it is, whether it's a bridge or a connector or a bypass, what the status of it is, how much it will cost, and how long would it take for us to get it built?" So I can do that. 2 or 3 weeks later, they said, "Ted's out here to see you." He came in and he gave me my little sheet or my several pages that explained what was on the promises list. The promises list involved 141 projects. Total price was $5.4 billion. And if we did nothing else for 50 years, we'd have it all done. That's when we began to think that we needed a better way to do project selection, a better way than a promise from your candidate for governor, your candidate for senator, and